open your Bibles, if you would, please, to 2 Samuel chapter 10. Now, if you don't have a Bible, raise your hand. The guys will bring you a copy, and it's like page 233 or 213. I looked early this morning. I can't remember one of those. But if you don't have a Bible, just raise your hand really high, and the guys will make sure you get a copy of that. I told you that when I got back from summer vacation, I was going to do what I learned on my summer vacation. I changed my mind as I started to put some of that together. And well, anyway, long story short, I'm going to do it in Priority Living. So if there's a curiosity about it, you can show up to one of those studies, or simply go in 2 or 3 weeks. It'll be online for Priority Living. But I got into a whole bunch of things, and I got distracted, and I thought, you people don't want to go through that. So I just did you a huge favor by sparing you what I learned on my summer vacation. And if you go to Priority Living, don't bring a razor blade with you when you come. So, because it's depressing what I learned. 2 Samuel chapter 10. This is what we're going to do today. Chapter 10, chapter 11, and half chapter 12. And that sounds like a lot. It is, but it'll go pretty smoothly. And the focus is going to be on a story that if you're like brand new to church, like if you've never been to church your whole life, you're here today or you're over in the conference center. I think sometimes I know I forget to mention that we have services in here, but also over in the conference center. They're going simultaneously. And I fail to mention that every week. And then also to remind you that after the service, there's part of our pastoral team will be in front of both of the buildings. They're here to pray with you, praise, worship, whatever it might be with you. But we're going to look at a story that if you're in church for the very first time, you probably at least have heard sketchy details of it. It's the story of David and Bathsheba. It is a story that magnifies this weakness. We've already seen it. David has a weakness. You know, they always say it's kind of gold or glory or girls are the trip up for people. David's is girls. He's got like 6 wives at this point, at least. And he's just got this thing for girls. And he's in the wrong place at the wrong time with the right girl here. And all sorts of things happen today. So we're going to look at that. But it's a beautiful picture, really, of redemption and of restoration and of the ugliness of sin, but quickly covered by the forgiveness of God. David gets there through a transition. There's this part of war that's still going on. David is a warrior, and his people are warriors. He's mighty men. Chapter 10, what has happened is the Ammonites have a new king, and David, in verse 2, makes a gesture of kindness to him. He says, I'll be kind to him the way his father showed kindness to me. I'm going to reciprocate here. So David sends these men on a mission of mercy, a mission of kindness. The Ammonites are a little bit paranoid about this, so they go to their king and they say, watch out for this. Verse 3, has not David sent his servants in order to search the city, to spy it out and overthrow it? I think this is a plot, they said. Be careful here. These guys are just on a reconnaissance mission. They're going to gather information. David's going to come back. He's going to wipe us out. So the king then takes David's servants in verse 4, and it's important now, he shaves off half their beard, and he cuts their garments up to their hips. Okay? And they're not wearing any jockeys at this point in time. So what he's done is humiliate and embarrass these guys. Huge insult. Word comes to David that this has taken place. And David says to the guys in verse 5, you stay in Jericho and get yourself some pants and let your beard grow back. Then come home. The sons of Ammon saw that what they had done had become, verse 6, odious to David. Here's what they said. Uh-oh. We're in trouble now. Because he was not coming to spy on us. But now he's out to get us. So they go, in verse 6, and hire, literally, Syrian mercenaries. The Arameans. And they bring them on. And they amass this mighty army. In verse 7, David hears of this. So he sends out his main man Joab and his army and his mighty men. In verse 8, we discovered that now Joab is surrounded. And Joab sees this in verse 9, And so he selects from his guys his choicest men and sets them array against the Arameans. Here's what he said. They're the wicked, the strongest. We're going to fight them there. If they beat us there, we're beaten. But this is our plan of attack. And he leaves the remainder of his guys. So he's selected these choice men. He leaves the remainder of his guys with his brothers to go fight the Ammonites. But he says, listen, in either case, verse 11, I got your backside. If we're having trouble, you come and support me. If you're having trouble, I'll come and support you. So that's the scene. And then Joab utters these words in verse 12, and we'll spend a second on this. Here's what he says. Be strong. Let us show ourselves courageous for the sake of our people, for the cities of our God, and may the Lord do what is good in His sight. He said, you know what? Here's what's happened. We understand the situation. We've analyzed it. We have a strategic plan. We're going to implement that plan. And we're going to trust God with the results. That's contrary to how I tend to think. Maybe you do too. It's contrary to how I tend to think. We live in a results-oriented world. I'm a sports guy. I don't know that I follow it as closely. I read just enough to be semi-conversant to have opinions that are unfounded about everything. So, I mean, that's a sports fan. And I've taught over the years. I've done Bible studies and conferences with Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA. I've done it with all sorts of pros, college sports, all sorts of athletes. By far, there's one group of people that they are the most unique of any of the group, and that is the NASCAR guys. I mean, the week I spent with the NASCAR guys, these guys are totally different. They're totally different than any other group of athletes. Their whole mindset is absolutely different. If you're with baseball, any other sport, there's a cross-pollination that takes place. I mean, the baseball guys follow golf, and they follow football and basketball. They do this. The NASCAR guys, I was in Hilton Head with them for a week, and I would say, they're from South Carolina, North Carolina, hotbed of it. I go, you follow basketball? No. What NFL team? No. NBA? No. What do you follow? NASCAR. That's what I was NASCAR. Well, I was out getting ready for one of the races here with them, and I'm doing a Saturday morning study. Every guy that came in the room and his team did the same thing. They stopped to look at the sheet, to look at the pole positions for the next day. All they cared about was the results. That's the way I am. Susan and I are boycotting the Republic. But we've forgotten why. It's been so long, we've forgotten why. We just know we're going to put it to the man. We're just not sure why. We don't remember why. Right? So I don't see a newspaper very often. Every time I get a newspaper, I do exactly the same thing. I get the sports section, and I just go to standings. I just go to results. That's all I care about. That's all that matters. My daughter shows up today wearing an Iowa shirt. And I said, you know what? It takes a certain level of courage to wear that shirt today based on yesterday. And those of you who don't follow these things, I will just explain to you in a nutshell. Iowa's a 24.5-point favorite, and they won the game yesterday, 17-16, by blocking 2 field goals in the last 7 seconds. And she said, hey, Dad, it's a W. And you know what? She's exactly right. You lose that game, and that season's in real jeopardy. You win it, nobody in 2 weeks is going to go, oh, remember it was a fluke. They're going to go, remember how exciting the ending was. That's how we are. We're wired for that. If you're a manager, here's what you want to know from your salespeople. What have you sold? I don't care what's going on in the rest of your life. Whatever. Save it for Oprah. Tell her. Find somebody that cares. I don't care. I want to know what have you sold. Okay? If you're running a restaurant, you're checking out at the end of the day. You hit a button, ding, and it tells you what the sales are. I'm going to match those up with my labor cost and with my food costs. I'm going to see what money I made. God is exactly the opposite. We're driven by the bottom line. God says, I'm in charge of the bottom line. It's the process I care about. We say, just make the deal. God says, no, it matters desperately how you make the deal. The process matters. It doesn't matter who wins or loses because I'm going to take care of that. You throw the dice, I determine the outcome. I'll bless who I'm going to bless. I'll bring rain where I'm going to bring rain. I've got all that taken care of. It's your heart and your obedience that I'm concerned about. That's pretty good, isn't it? He looks totally different than we do. And Joab gets this. Joab, by the way, emerges to me as a pretty cool guy the more I study this. He says, we've planned, we've worked. The fact that God controls the outcome is not an excuse for us to be lazy. It's not an excuse for us to say, well, that's just the way it is, and, you got to... No. We work, we plan, we prepare, we execute, and then we trust God for the results. Joab gets that. Do you get it? Obedience over results. The process is important to God because He's got the result then covered. Now the war breaks out, and I'm just going to give it to you real quickly. Away these people go, and they take the Arameans and they just start to wipe these guys out. They just start to blow these guys away. And so then David finds out about this. They line up against each other. And verse 19, here's kind of the summation. The servants of all the Arameans come, and they essentially surrender unconditionally, and they're afraid to go to Ammon, which is now Ammon, Jordan, to the Ammonites and fight there. They're done. Now comes the season, the weather, when the battles would subside. They wouldn't fight in bad weather. But spring comes in chapter 11, verse 1. It happened in the springtime, at the time when the kings go to battle. Okay? So it's the time, here it is. It's wartime. The kings are supposed to go to battle. David sent Joab and his servants with him, and all of Israel, and sends them out to go to fight the Ammonites. Now, here's the key sentence. It's the last one of verse 1. But David stayed in Jerusalem. Now, the king should have been out with the guys fighting. He should have been out there in the battlefield. But he decides not to go. For whatever reason, I made a list. I came up with 3 reasons. One, he was just tired. As close as we can tell, he's into his 50s now. And he maybe has just now had decades and decades of this, and he's seen enough fighting, and he's seen enough blood, and he's just worn out. I made a comment the other day that there's a sense, and there's a lot of danger here. Me having a month to think is probably not a good thing. But there's a sense in which life is a young person's game. There's a sense in which, I am so grateful that I'm not working in some company where I got to go to Vegas and listen to another hype story from the corporate headquarters and go, we've seen all of this. How many pins and plaques are you going to try to take me to incentivize me and cut my pay at the same time? I don't need to go through that. It's just a young man. It's a young man's game. And it may be that David's just going on just pooped. The second reason I came up with was a little more positive. And that was that maybe he felt he can trust Joab and they got it under control. He's delegated. Didn't want to be really distracted by a lot of the details. Not an excuse, but he's just saying, these guys can handle this. Wipe these guys out. This is just a cleanup job. This is spring cleaning against the enemy. This is no big deal. The third reason would be he's really become addicted to the comfort. If you remember, we followed David for decades, going from cave to cave to cave, sleeping on the ground, not a lot of any sort of amenities at all. Now he's in the palace, he has servants, he has the best food. And he's going, you know what? I don't want that hassle. It's funny because I can relate to all 3 of these, really, in my own life. I feel tired on one end. I feel totally comfortable that, for example, like here at East Valley Bible Church, that anything that's going on, the leadership team's totally in control. And I am somewhat addicted to comfort. I was reviewing the other day. It's been a while now, but several years ago, I did 27 speaking things outside of Phoenix in a year. Now, that's a lot. That's every other week, plus priority living, plus the church. And as a pastor, I've done men's conferences especially, and conferences all over. And so men's conferences, here's how they'll go. They'll call, and until recently, I always handle my own calendar. They'll call and they say, are you available on such and such a weekend? And I'll say, yeah, maybe, I don't know. What do you want? And this is, what's the group? I don't know. And they'll say, what do you charge for this? And I say, I don't do that. If at the end of this time you feel you want to pay me, that's good. And if you don't, that's okay too. And some people don't, and some people do. So they'll say, do you have any specific needs, any dietary needs? I said, no, I don't. I do have a specific need. I need to know the accommodations. I need to know the thread count of the sheets on these beds. I mean, and so if they say, well, it's at Prescott, and then I'd say, okay, it doesn't even matter what comes next. I just know I'm not available that weekend. I mean, Prescott Pines, sorry. Prescott, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't work. And I know that sounds elitist and everything else, but it just, I'm sorry, it just is. It is. So that might have been David's deal. I don't know. So I can associate with him on any of these three levels. The problem is this. He's where he shouldn't be. That's the problem. So he's in the wrong place. He's in a time of prosperity. Now, it amuses me, the application points over the years, because I've been doing this about 25 years now. Years ago, at this point in the study, I would point out a guy like David is in the midst of prosperity, and we're vulnerable there. Most of us have a hard time relating to that right now, because most of us are struggling at some level. The point is this. Paul says to put on the full armor of God. And we've told you many times in the Greek, the word is put on and leave on. See, we put on armor to go to battle. Got it. We take it off when the battle's over. Totally reasonable. Right? That makes sense. But David says, put on the full armor of God and leave on the full armor of God because you're in battle 24/7. If I say to you right now, God is somehow either going to test you, or Satan is somehow going to tempt you, or he's going to bring some hardship or difficulty or challenge into your life, whatever it is, some testing, you immediately think of, okay, I'm going to have a relationship that breaks up, a spouse that leaves, I'm going to get sick, I'm going to lose this, something catastrophic. But we rarely think of the test that comes with prosperity and health. If I don't have health, I don't have a lot of decisions about what to do with my time. Well, when I'm healthy and I feel good and I've got options. Thomas Carlyle, the historian, said for every 100 people that can pass the test of adversity, there's only one that can pass the test of prosperity. No. But David's in a good place right now in terms of career, king, success, blowing out all the opposition. But that's how we think. That's why a bumper sticker, God is my co-pilot. Well, that bumper sticker says a ton. Here's what it says is, I'm the one who's the pilot. I'm the one who's flying this plane. I'm the one that's in control. Periodically, it's going to get scary. Here, you take it then, but as soon as we're out of that, I'll take it right back. Thank you very much. David's where he's not supposed to be. And at a time he shouldn't be there. And he's about to experience sin. As I said, he's 50 plus years of age, but he's got this girl thing. What's your thing, by the way? Because you never outgrow it. The lifelong struggle for sin. I want to give you a picture of what's going to happen here. So leave your finger, somehow mark 2 Samuel. We're going to go to the right, all the way to the end of the New Testament and then back. So all the way to the end of the New Testament, and then start going back. Book of Revelation and 1st, 2nd, 3rd John, 1st, 2nd Peter, to the book of James. And James is going to tell us exactly what happened here. And it's the same thing that happens in all of our lives all of the time. This is how sin works. Okay? And James gives us really here kind of behind the scenes look. Here's what he says. James chapter 1, verse 14. But each one is tempted when he is carried away and enticed by his own lust. And when lust is conceived, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is accomplished, it brings forth death. So let's define a couple of terms here. When he uses the term lust, we think sexual. That's part of it. It's any sort of feeling. It can be a totally good feeling, but it's a feeling that's gone awry. It's out of control. There's something internal that's attracted to something external. And then these two things come together. And James uses some really vivid imagery here. So get it? Here's what he says. Each one is tempted, that's every one of us, when something happens. Something inside of us is carried away. It's enticed. It's the idea of bait that's coming in front of us. It's the idea of something that lures an animal out of a place of safety and pop it. Something happens to us internally when we come in contact with something externally. It pulls us away. Now that's just temptation. There's no sin there. And then this lust is conceived. You begin to act on it, it gives birth to sin, and when sin is accomplished, it brings forth death. It brings forth destruction. That's the picture in all of our lives. We're going to look at David, we're going to look at his situation with Bathsheba, but this is what plays out in your life every day. It's the same thing. We go all the way back to the garden. It's the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, boastful pride of life. It's something external that connects with something inside of us and pulls us away. Now, let's go back to 2 Samuel. You can see it work. Evening had come. David arose from his bed, and he walked around the roof of the king's house. And from the roof, he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful in appearance. So, David's strolling around. He's not supposed to be there to begin with. He's supposed to be out fighting with these guys. Again, still, there's nothing wrong with her. And he sees this woman. And this woman is as close as you can tell, is a beautiful one. Very beautiful in appearance. Now, I'd love to say, it doesn't say it in the text here, but I'm convinced it was at this point that he said to one of his servants, "Get me the royal binoculars." So he gets the royal binoculars, and he's looking. And he's searching, and he's focusing them, and he's looking, and he sees that she is very beautiful in appearance. And he looks for a while. And something external entices something internal. Something connects there. The problem is still not even there. But he says, go find out who that is. And they said, well, I think that's Bathsheba, and you got a couple of problems, David. One, you shouldn't be here. One, you shouldn't be messing around. One, you got 6 wives already. And you got another problem. She's got a husband. David says, whatever, go, get her email, get her phone number, and we're going to hook up. They do. She comes, she sleeps with him. So now the sin has taken place. 2 consenting adults, no big deal. But in verse 5, Bathsheba says, hey, David, we got ourselves a little memory of our encounter. Okay? I'm pregnant. Oops. We didn't plan on that. David says, well, let me think about this just a second, because I know there's a plan here. I want to do this, and I'm doing it for you. I want to protect you. I know what I'll do. And he says in verse 6, send Uriah the Hittite. So Joab sends Uriah to David. Now, we don't get it from this, but at the end of this book, when we talk about David's mighty men and his top soldiers, his top 30 fighting men are listed, and one of them is Uriah the Hittite. So this guy's a Congressional Medal of Honor winner. This guy is a cream of the crop guy. What we're going to find out, he's not just a great warrior, he's a man of huge integrity. So Uriah comes to him, and David says, verse 7, how's the battle going? What's going on out there? And so he tells him, and David says, go down to your house and wash your feet. And Uriah went out of the king's house, a present and a present from the king was sent out after him. But Uriah, here's the deal. Uriah slept at the door of the king's house and all the servants in the Lord, and they did not go down to his house. Here was David's plan A. All right, you're home. You're a healthy guy. You've been at war a while. You're already here. Clean yourself up and go visit your wife. Inevitably, what will happen is one thing will lead to another. Then, when we find out she's pregnant, you're going to go, oh, yeah, that's when I was home giving you that reconnaissance report. But this guy has so much integrity that he's saying, I can't do that. My men are out fighting. Verse 10, so when they told David, they said, Uriah didn't go down to his house. David said, wait a minute. You've come this journey. Why not go down to your house? Go do it. I'm giving you permission for this. Plan B. Just go do it. Now, here's a letter. You need a letter. Here's a letter. You're on leave. Go do it. Uriah says to David, the ark of Israel and Judah are staying in temporary shelters. My lord Joab and the servants, my lord, are camped in the open field. Shall I then go and eat and drink and lay with my wife? He's saying, I couldn't do that, David. Now, there's an implication. What's the implication here, by the way? There's an implication there, isn't it? And you shouldn't be either, David. David, I can't be out there, and you shouldn't be either. So David says to him, well, stay. Now, David's down to plan C now. David said, stay, and tomorrow I'll let you go. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem the next day. And David called him, verse 13, and they ate and drank, and David got him drunk. David's going, okay, so this guy's pretty reasonable, but I'll just get him liquored up, and at this point, that'll break that discipline, and away he'll go. So he gets drunk, but he still doesn't go and lie with her. He doesn't go to his own house. So plan A, B, and C have failed. David said, all right, here's what I'm going to do. And he sends a letter to Joab, and Uriah carries the letter. Uriah hand delivers what in essence is his death sentence. Because he'd written in the letter, verse 15, place Uriah in the front of the line, the fiercest battle, then withdraw with him so he would be struck dead. So it was as Joab watched on the city, he put Uriah in the place where he knew there were valiant men, and the men of the city went out, and they fought against Joab, and some of the people against David's servants fell, and Uriah the Hittite died. Then Joab sent a report to David of all the events. So now the battle's taken place. Joab, sends this report back to David. And he says to the guy, when you finish telling all the events of the war to the king, if it happens that the king's wrath rises against you, and he says to you, why did you go so near to the city? Did you not know that they would shoot from the wall? So he says, here's what happens. When you go and deliver this report, if David gets mad and says, hey, what kind of a strategy is this? You're coming against the city, you know it's fortified. You know you're just going to sit there firing down on you. Who thought this battle plan up? Well, if he says this to you, you simply say, verse 21, last part, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead. So the messenger departed, and he came and reported to David all that Joab had told him. And the messenger said to David, the men prevailed against us. They came out against us from the field. They pressed us as far as the entrance. Moreover, the archers shot your servants from all the walls, so that some of the king's servants are dead, and your servant Uriah the Hittite is also dead. Now, that's what David wanted. You see what's going on here, right? David has eyes for Bathsheba. We're going to see this real quickly. He's going to end up taking her as his wife. And this is how he's going to get there. He's going to eliminate Uriah. And by the way, then David just said to the messenger, you go back and you just tell Joab basically war is hell, isn't it? These things happen. And when the wife of Uriah the Hittite heard this, she went into mourning. Verse 27, when the time of the mourning was over, David sent her, brought her in. She became his wife, and she bore him a son. Everything's taken care of now. You're going to have this baby, but you and I got together that honeymoon night. None of those weird things happened a little faster than we thought. Boom, there it is. But just like at the end of verse 1, there was a sentence, but David stayed in Jerusalem. There's a sentence that ends the chapter. But the thing David had done was evil in the sight of the Lord. He had sinned, and his sin was not against Bathsheba, Uriah the Hittite, or Joab, or anybody else. His sin was against God. So God sends a messenger, chapter 12, to David, and he tells him a story. And the story is about a man, two men, a rich one and a poor one. And the rich one has many flocks, and the poor one has what's identified in verse 3 as one little ewe lamb. And he treated him like a pet, and he took care of him. It came time for the slaughter, and the rich man took the poor man's sheep and slaughtered him and devoured him. So Nathan comes to David and tells him that story. David's anger, verse 5, burns greatly against the man. And he said to Nathan, as surely as the Lord lives, surely the man who's done this thing deserves to die. Now there's an appropriate penalty there. To take one, you would be compensated with 4. But David goes way beyond this. In righteous indignation, he said, this guy deserves death. David becomes all of a sudden very angry and very judgmental. So often that happens in our lives, I think, too. David sees this injustice. And it really is his own sin, isn't it? In fact, that's what Nathan says to him. Hey, David, verse 7, you're this man. That happens in our lives. We're told to be careful when we judge, not to judge too quickly, to take the log out of our eye before we pick the speck out of someone else's. And as you kind of understand that, first of all, I love that word picture of a guy with just a big log out of his eye. But the speck is the idea that it's a material, it's a chip off of this log that's in somebody else's eye. So often you'll see somebody say, it just drives me nuts. They're such a proud, arrogant person. So often what you're seeing in them is nothing more than a reflection of what's in you. So often it's the very thing that's in our lives that drives us nuts when we see it in somebody else. David has that moment. He's risen up. It's like, be. There needs to be justice here. There needs to be judgment here. There needs to be penalty here. And Nathan says, hey, buddy, it's you. And quickly, Nathan's message, which is a message from God, does 3 things. Look with me in verse 7. First of all, he revisits the history of the relationship. I appointed you king of Israel. I anointed you the king. I delivered you. I gave you the master's house. I gave you the master's wife. How's all that? David, remember all of these things. Remember all that has been done. Remember who you are. Remember the grace and the mercy that's been extended to you. So let me ask you this, David, verse 9. Why have you despised the Lord? Why have you done this? Why have you struck down Uriah? Why have you taken his wife as your wife? Had him killed by the swords of Ammon. And he said, therefore, the sword will never depart from you. There's judgment. There's consequence to this. And next week we're going to look at some of the consequence. But I'm going to look at verse 13. In my mind, as I've taught the book of 1st and 2nd Samuel, I've told different people, it's really hard to have this huge respect for David until you step back and realize that David's just like us. But you get this idea, it's like David, a man after God's own heart, this extraordinary guy. You kind of expect a whole bunch of stuff from him. And then you see failure after failure after failure, right? How can it be a man after God's own heart? I think the answer is in verse 13. He's confronted by Nathan. He doesn't make any excuses. He doesn't go get a guy from Goldberg and Osborne to plead a case for him. He doesn't try to somehow cop a plea. He just simply says, I did it. I've sinned. I've sinned against you, God. And immediately, here's the words that I think he wants to hear desperately. And the Lord has taken away your sin. I've sinned. It's me. Now, our flinch is to be really hard on David. Or people like David. Or people when they sin. That's just how we're wired. When I was at Cannon Beach, a guy made a comment. He said, I was up here the last time you taught, and you said something that was really insightful. I said, really? That's cool. What was it? And I'd forgotten all about it, obviously. And he had said, you said that our instinct is to judge ourselves by our intention and to judge others by their actions. And that's true. I might be engaged in something that doesn't work out. And I say, well, that wasn't what I intended to do. I hadn't planned on that. But when I see it in others, I never, ever climb into their skin to try to understand that there may be a reason for that very thing. Not to excuse things away. I'm not even talking about sin here. I'm just saying some sort of behavior, some sort of attitude, something that might take in place. Or even in the area of sin. I go, there's intention, here was the plan. Because no. I never cut anybody else that slack. And I don't want to get away from all the other stuff of this, but I want to stay on the grace of this and the forgiveness that God extends to us. It's not in any way to excuse sin. It makes me sick that we have to do this explanation every time, but I know we do. The minute we start talking about grace, it becomes so dangerous. Because all of a sudden we're saying we're not dealing with sin or whatever it is, and that's not true. But we ought to at least have the mercy and the sensitivity and the grace that God has. David's confronted with his sin, and the minute, bam, I did it. Now, turn with me. We're done here. Turn to the right a couple of books. 1st, 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Chronicles. Kind of thumb along till you hit a big book called Psalms. And go to the 51st Psalm. Psalm 51, Psalm 32 would be kind of two Psalms you'd go to at this point. But we're going to go to Psalm 51. And the heading in my Bible says this. A Psalm of David when Nathan the prophet came to him after he'd gone into Bathsheba. Here's what David cries. And David expresses a total, complete understanding of himself, of his sin, and of God's mercy. And he understands his own weakness. He back in 2 Samuel, there was a point in there where they were talking about making sacrifices. He said, I don't want any sacrifices. I don't need your sacrifices. I don't need your religion. I need this intimate personal relationship. David writes this, be gracious to me, O God. This is after this, in the midst of this, as he reflects on this, as he journals. Be gracious to me, O God, according to thy loving kindness, according to the greatness of your compassion. Blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity. Cleanse from me my sin. For I know my transgressions and they're ever before me. I love that. David said, I get the sin part. I get how serious this really is. I absolutely understand it. I can't get away from it. God, cleanse me from it. I'm banking on this. It's what Tim talked about last week. He's talking about David representing Christ and extending to the last of Saul's descendants, to extending to them kindness, loving kindness, grace and mercy to this poor, crippled orphan who's totally dependent and intimidated by the king, who expects the king to wipe him out. And David extends to him not judgment, but grace. Come dine with me, stay with me, live with me, stay under my protection. I'll watch over you. That's what God does to you. And this is so important. And my fear is that we miss this. Not just to get us into the kingdom of God. It's not just the grace to save us. It's the grace to sustain us. It's the grace that I need day after day. We don't need a show of hands, but my suspicion would be at some level, don't know what it is, at some level, everybody in the room, to some degree, has sinned this week. And I may look at it and go, well, it's nothing like David and Bathsheba. Well, it's a sin against God. How do you respond to that? Why do I become cavalier and say, well, boys will be boys, that's just the way it is? Well, no, that's no good. Do I become filled with despair and depression and remorse? No. I go to Him and I say, listen, I want you to wash me. I want you to cleanse me. This is before me. I get it. How deep is my sin? Verse 5, I was brought forth in iniquity. I came into the world a sinner. From the very beginning. It's my nature. It's who I am. Purify me, verse 7. Wash me. Make me white as snow. Make me to hear the joy and the gladness. Let the bones which you have broken rejoice. Hide your face from my sin. Blot out my iniquities. Here's what I need, God. Create in me a clean heart, a broken and a contrite spirit. Verse 17. The sacrifices of God, they're this: a broken spirit, a contrite heart. That's what I want, God. You to do a work in me. You to do something powerful in me. I got a disease. It's a heart disease. Even my new heart, I still sin. God, I hate it, but I still do it. And I know it offends you. God, restore. Look at that in verse 12. Restore the joy of my salvation. This sin is eating me alive, God. And the only thing that can deliver me from this is you. Knowing that you have forgiven me. And you create a clean heart in me. One of the authors writes this: it's through this account of failure that the gospel of the Messiah is illuminated for us. It reminds us of how central Christ's sacrifice on the cross is to our faith. Not only is an act which has secured us acceptance before God, but is an act that opens a way of life of holiness and purity. It is sin that makes the sacrifice of Christ, necessary, but it's the sacrifice that breaks the power of sin over us. This is a sacrifice that breaks that bondage. That we've been set free. Free indeed. Free from what? Well, free from this sin. Free for what? Free to be His guy. Real freedom. Not adolescent freedom. I read a book early in the summer, and I loved this book. And I loved the book. And so I was doing a little research on the author, and there was some sin in the author's life. And so I had given this book to a friend to read. And when I gave it to him, he said, I know this guy's name somehow. I said, yeah, I don't know. And he said, well, I know his name. I know this name. Oh, yeah, didn't he? And then he laid out his sin. I said, yeah. And he goes, I don't think I could read it. No, knowing what he had been through, I don't think I could read it. I said, well, reading the book of Psalms must be a real killer for you then. I'm telling you, man, we are so hard on each other and so judgmental, and I can be at the top of that list. Not to excuse. See, that's what I'm saying. So the minute now we talk about freedom or grace, we begin to talk about license. Well, one of the authors writes this: our freedom is to truly love and to call to difference between what he calls adolescent freedom and mature freedom. Adolescent freedom only asks, what's am I free from? Mature freedom says, what am I free for? Adolescent freedom asks, what's forbidden? Mature freedom says, what's helpful? Adolescent freedom embraces the liberty to do my own thing, but mature freedom embraces the liberty to do Christ's thing. Adolescent freedom often confuses legalism and obedience. Mature freedom understands the difference. Mature freedom not only understands the exhilaration of being free from the wrong master, but the greater exhilaration of being enslaved to the right master. Mature freedom recognizes both being free and a servant. As Martin Luther says, a Christian is both a perfectly free Lord of all and a perfectly dutiful servant of all. I'm walking down the beach. I'm not going to give you what I learned on my summer vacation, but the people this week, you're going to get a long version of this. I'm walking down the beach, and I had this thought. And as I share with you, you're going to go, really? So it took you that long to figure this out? And I'll say, yeah, I'm not that smart. If I said to you, I was reflecting back on the present political and economic situation in our country. I'm reflecting back to the last election. And I'm reflecting back because I have all these people saying, well, if I knew this, I would have never voted for this. And I'm going, well, this is not a secret. They told you they were going to do this. It's not a surprise. There were two words that emerged out of the last election. Two words. It really became the linchpin words of the last election. Here they were. What were they? Change. What was the other one? Hope. Change and hope. Now, I don't know if you'd ever thought about that before, but I'm walking along and I'm thinking, how did we get here? How did we get in arguably a disastrous position? $9 trillion in debt in the next decade, blah, 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 blah. See why I decided not to talk about this? How did you sell this bill of goods? Change and hope. We want hope for the future, and it requires a change. I'm going to add one more word, because I buy that thought process. I buy that thought process. I want hope. I want a bright future. I want to know. I watched all of the Teddy Kennedy's funeral, all the memorials, all the stuff. And it was all about the hope of the future. And Teddy is with his mom Rose and his brothers Joe and all of that. And it was all about the future. Hope. We want hope. Okay? Well, here's what I understand. I understand that I'm not going to get there on my own. I'm screwed. I got this thing called sin which is in the way. So I need change. Okay? I need to change to get to this hope. But here's what you and I get. We get the word that precedes and causes the change. What is it? Grace. That's what it is. It's the grace that God rots in our heart. It's the grace that God brings to create a new heart, to cleanse me, to give me a broken spirit, because I don't have that. When that happens, there's a change that takes place. My heart of stone becomes a heart of flesh. My destination, my destiny, everything changes. And now I have hope for the future. Romans 15:13. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that you may abound in hope. How? By the power of the Holy Spirit. You abound in hope. How? By God who's done this. That word hope, it means the joyful, confident expectation of an eternal salvation. That's the hope that we have. When we're talking about death, 1 Thessalonians 4:13, we do not want you to be uninformed, brethren, about those who have fallen asleep, so that you will not grieve as those who have no hope. But we have hope. 1 Timothy 4:10, for we labor and strive for this, because we have fixed our hope on the living God, Jesus Christ. Because of this grace, it's not, and here's now that one more, and then we're out of time. We'll pick it up next week. It's not just that I have hope for the sweet by and by. It's that I have hope for here. That I have grace for here. I need that grace. I need that grace in my life, and I need to extend that grace to others as well. It's the forgiveness that I find in Him. It's the joy that I find in Him. Why isn't there more joy in the Christian life? I think it's because we haven't linked those three words. The change of grace that takes place after salvation, not just before it, that leads to a change in my life that gives me hope, in spite of all the other stuff around me. Now, does that mean that, okay, here we are, we're overlooking all of this stuff and nobody's going to really deal seriously with it? Well, here's the problem we get when we get to next week. So Nathan went to his house, and then the Lord struck the child that Uriah's wife bore to David, so that he's very sick. I want to look at that next week. Father, thank you for the grace that you bring in our life, that allows us to change, causes us to change, that produces hope. A hope that is not just some wishful thinking. It's not positive mental attitude. It's the reality of the change that, in fact, we now are headed for heaven, but we're your kids here. God, we pray that you would make in us a clean heart, a broken and a contrite spirit, that we would love you. That God, as we sin, we would be like David, we would confess it. And we'd understand that's our sin is against you. God, I thank you for the model that we have in David. I thank you that in this book, you just didn't put together a story of a guy with no problems and no sin. We see him, as we say, warts and all. God, thank you for that, because in it we find hope. God, thank you for Jesus. We pray to you in His name. Amen. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.